Get broadcasting on the other channels as well. Good evening and welcome to this Ask Me Anything About Property Investing with myself, Saj Hussain, on episode number 48. This is Ask Me Anything About Property Investing, and I'm here for about half an hour really to share my knowledge and experience with you to ultimately help you get further faster in your property investing journey. So I've been investing in property for about 15 years now, and during that time I've done lots and lots of different strategies. Many things haven't worked, but what it has enabled me to do is build up a lot of knowledge and experience around different strategies and investing in property and understanding how the market's changing and how we need to adapt as well. Right now, we're in a period where there's lots of change happening. 2021, I believe, is going to be very different for property investors, but it's also going to present some great opportunities as well. And I think we need to be ready and prepared for that. So I'm broadcasting live on various different platforms, so YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. If you've got a question for me that you'd like me to answer this evening, pop it into the comment section. We'll do our very best to answer that for you. I can't promise I'm going to be able to answer every question there is, but we'll certainly do our best to get through as many as we can this evening for about half an hour. Remember, I'm here every Monday evening at 8:30, really to help you with your property investing journey. So let's get our first question up on the screen now, and then we'll get started with the questions. So our first question is from Jamie. Hi, Saj. This is on YouTube. Your interview with LN Capital was really insightful. I would recommend all your viewers, subscribers to watch if you don't think it's on your channel. So Jamie, thank you for that. This is Luigi Newton interviewed me this is a few weeks ago, and this is a video that's on his channel. We'll see if we can link it up for those that want to watch that there. So thank you for that, Jamie. More of a comment than a question. So next question is from Jamie, which is grade 2 listed buildings. Do you get involved with them at all? Appropriate for HMOs or BRRR? So I have got involved with listed buildings, but not necessarily grade 2 listed buildings. And I think the thing to remember about listed buildings is things will work a little bit differently, but they're not necessarily as frightful as people sometimes think they are. Often the concerns are that you're going to be very limited in terms of what you can do with the building. Yes, there are some limitations, but you have to understand why is the building listed and what is it that they're trying to preserve and retain that building. So often it might be the front facade, for example, on a property, or it may be literally everything inside down to the light switches need to be kept to the original because that's what they're trying to maintain. So rather than a renovation, I'd consider those more of a restoration rather than a renovation when you're working on projects like that. The other thing to be mindful of is your permitted development rights pretty much disappear. They get thrown out the window, so you can't necessarily take a house that is a family house, but it's listed and convert it to a HMO. And then other things that are also beneficial as well, that, for example, the EPC requirements, you don't necessarily have to comply with those or even all the building regulations. Now, this is something you need to negotiate with your local council in terms of what they will and won't allow you to do. But essentially, because you're trying to preserve the original property, for example, if you've got old wooden style windows and you're not able to replace them, then there's going to be a certain amount of energy loss within the property, and that means it prevents you from improving the EPC rating of that property as well. So there tends to be a little bit of flexibility and negotiation on that. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a bit more information there, Jamie. And we'll get our next question up on the screen, which is from Jack Smith, also on YouTube. Hi, Saj. What's the best way to finance properties and what's the process for refinancing after refurbishing? Also, what do you use as deciding factor when rent a property or resell after refurbishing? So Jack, I have a video that will be released, I think it's next Wednesday, so in just over a week's time, which is specifically on this topic about buying or refurbishing, refinancing property, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it as well. But in a nutshell, to answer your specific question, when it comes to financing the property, my preference is to buy in cash. And the way we tend to do that is I work with a lot of investors, a lot of other people. So people come to me with cash and say, hey, look, we want to get involved in property. So they'll either partner with me on a project or they'll lend money for the project. And if you want to get involved, I say you need a minimum of £50,000. Ping me a message if that's something you want to explore a little bit more in terms of how I work with investors that way. But what that does enable us to buy cash. We can pick up very good deals. We can also complete transactions very quickly. Now, when it comes to the refinancing of those, it really depends on what the end objective is we're trying to achieve. What I tend not to do is wait till the renovation is done, then decide if we're going to sell or refinance, for a few different reasons. Firstly, when we're looking to sell a property, what we're looking to do is maximize that ceiling price so we can achieve a profit and walk away from that deal at the end once we've exited. Now, that's something we need to take into consideration before we even start planning the layout of that property, what it's going to look like before we make any commitments or start any work on that property. Also, it means there might be certain planning applications and stuff we might make. We can determine how much we're going to spend on kitchen and bathroom, for example. They're going to be probably much, much more expensive than they might be in a simple buy, renovate, and rent type of strategy. Now, if on the other hand, we're going to rent the property, what we're trying to do is make it appealing to whichever tenant type we're trying to appeal to and put the right type of layout in and also the right type of fittings that are going to suit that particular tenant. And that way it means we're going to get a really good rent, cherry pick the best tenant, and that will also help us when we come to the refinancing, i.e. the remortgaging. Generally, a mortgage broker will help you try and find the best product at that point so we can achieve the best market value for that property in order to be able to extract as much cash as we possibly can. So Jack, I hope that gives you a little bit of an overview, but look out for that video. That'll be on the YouTube channel next week. If you don't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Enable the notification bell as well, because that means YouTube will notify you when the videos are released onto the channel. So thanks so much for that question, Jack. Let's get the next question up on the screen. So next one from Catherine on LinkedIn. Good evening. What percentage BMV discount do you think we should aim to achieve for the BRRR method in this market, and roughly how many offers does it usually take to get an acceptance? I appreciate it depends on many factors, but usually benchmark or scale from your experience would be interesting. Let's break that down, Catherine, into a few different components. So in terms of a percentage discount, I say, so if I use a context of where we are right now, which is Birmingham, we've been investing in Birmingham for quite a long time, and the Birmingham market has evolved quite a bit. So when I first got started, that's really the strategy. The strategy was finding discounted property, below market value property, getting a property for below what it's currently worth so we can lock in some equity from day one. And at that time, we were primarily aiming for about 20-25% when we could get that discount. Sometimes it might even be a little bit less, but that's what we were aiming for, which meant that if you have a 75% mortgage, you're going to be able to extract most of that cash out because you've locked in about 25% of the equity already. But then when we really got into the credit crunch, this is kind of 2009, 2010, we're picking up some properties that were 40% below market value and sometimes even more. It wasn't common, but we were coming across these deals because the market was very different, the supply and demand changed. So what that means is there were a lot more properties available on the market than there were buyers, which meant we can negotiate very, very good deals in getting those properties. Now, if you fast forward to today, where it's a buoyant market, lots of people buying, very little stock on the market, so there's many more buyers than there is supply in the market, what that means is that it's much, much more difficult to get that discounted property. So over the last few years, we haven't really focused on getting discounted property, but we've been looking for getting the right property in the right location, depending on what we're going to do with it. So for instance, if we want to create a HMO there, what we're looking for is the right type of what I call donor property that lends itself to the conversion that we want to try and create there, and it's in the right location. One of the common areas that we will have our HMOs near public transport, etc., whatever it is that we need to be near. In that case, we're not necessarily looking for below market value, although that'd be nice. We're looking to get the right property and make sure the numbers stack for us. And I just work backwards on numbers. What I mean by that is I start with what I think I'm going to be able to achieve, what's the end value going to be, and how much we're going to have to spend to get it to that point, and how much profit we want to build into it, and then what is it that we can afford to pay for that property. Now, sometimes that might even be above the asking price. It has been on a couple of occasions over the last couple of years where we've paid probably a little bit more than the property is actually even worth. So forget below market value. Now we're paying over market value because it all depends on the exit that we're trying to achieve. Now, ideally, we want a discounted property because it means we're making profit from day one. Again, as I mentioned earlier to Jack, look out for that video I'm going to be releasing next week on this specific strategy where I'll go into it in a lot more detail. So there's two ways you're going to make money. One is you're buying at a discount up front, which is what we're talking about, getting some discount in terms of the current value. The other thing is you're adding value to the property by reconfiguring its layout or extending it or improving it, modernizing it. So there's two ways that we're going to add value to that, be able to increase its value, as it were, based on what we're paying for the property. So it isn't necessarily getting a discount, although discount is nice. And if we are looking for a certain percentage to be able to extract the money out, it's generally around 25% because we're probably going to end up with a 75% mortgage at the end. That means we're much more likely to be able to get the money out. In terms of the second part of your question, what number of offers you've got to make to what is going to be accepted, this is really a case of how long is a piece of string. It's very difficult to answer because if you're going and viewing 100 properties and you're putting offers, you might get lucky and find somebody that's really keen to sell at that moment in time that would consider your offer. But as I said, when the market's like this, it's strong as it is here in Birmingham, which I'm not sure where you're based, but depending on your local market, and I suspect it's pretty much the same around the country right now, the market's quite strong. It might start to slow down over coming months. But what you'll find is the agents are going to be more dismissive of your offers. The sellers are going to be more of the mindset that there's plenty of people looking to buy. There's 20 people that viewed my property. I'm going to be able to get the figure that I want. So you might be putting in many offers and not actually getting anywhere. On the other hand, when the market starts to slow, that's when you'll start seeing more of your offers will be considered and possibly accepted. So when I was doing direct to vendor marketing, this is now not going to the estate agent, but trying to find vendors directly, the sellers of those particular properties. So I was marketing using leaflets, newspaper adverts, a little bit online marketing. So this was the method I was using. So for every 20 leads we'd probably generate, we'd probably find one of those would translate into a deal. That was probably my typical conversion at that point. With estate agents, I think it really does depend on lots of other factors. Most importantly, where we are in the marketplace right now and where the supply and demand is. So Catherine, I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a few pointers in terms of your particular question. So let's get our next question. Well, I get some breath of air as well. So I think I talked too fast sometimes, but I'll try and cram in as many questions as we can though. Our next question's on YouTube. Nightcore Addiction, great name. What could I invest with 4K that has low risk? So let's break that down into two parts as well in terms of what's risk in property. Look, there's risk in everything that we do. There's risk in property when you're investing in property, and what you'll find is it depends on your appetite for risk. So it doesn't necessarily mean. Let me just sorry, this video just stopped on Instagram. I'm just trying to get it started again. Just 1 second. Bear with me a moment. Technology, hey. So, with risk, it could be that you're looking at speculative investing. By speculative investing, I mean you're purchasing something with the hope it's going to go up in value. You're buying a piece of land because you might be able to get planning gain on that. Those are fairly high risk type strategies. On the low end of the risk, it might be you're lending money for a project, or you're buying something for cash, which is below market value. So there's plenty of what we call headroom in it, lots of equity in that deal. But your returns are probably going to be at the extremes as well. So there's two examples of risk in terms of the extreme, but your returns are going to be also at those two ends of the spectrum as well. So that's firstly to understand. It doesn't necessarily mean there's always a higher risk as the return gets higher, because some of it's about having knowledge and understanding of the market as well and how you can benefit from that. Now, when you're starting with a very small amount of money, the reality is you can't really go and purchase a property for £4,000. It's unlikely to even going to be enough for a deposit. Unless you're buying something very, very cheap somewhere around the country, you can still buy properties for 20, 30, 40,000 pounds. Often they're not in the best kind of places. Often it's the kind of places where you might struggle to get decent tenants and you'll probably have more problems managing and running that property. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just much more difficult. It's a much more problematic market that you're getting involved in. Now, ultimately, if the objective is to try and build up cash flow, even if you do manage to purchase one of those properties, your rental profit is going to be tiny. It's going to be 100, 200 quid if you're lucky from that particular property. And then that's it. You run out of money. What do you do now? So I think when you're getting started, and I think there's 3 strategies that you can probably follow. They're not everybody's cup of tea, but there's 3 ways you can start with very little cash. The first one is sourcing property, getting very good at finding deals and then offering those deals to other people. Effectively, you're sourcing deals and you're selling them on and charging a fee. Now, you don't own any property in this strategy, but what you are doing is really honing your skills in finding very, very good deals. Because the thing is, when you get very good at finding deals, you don't have to worry about finding the money. The money will come and find you, and people start finding out more about you and what you do and how you find these type of deals. People will come and talk to you. And some of those you might be able to then convert into potential joint venture partners at some stage, which is exactly the strategy I followed. That's how I got started. So I started sourcing property, then I started partnering with people to do some of those deals, buy the deals rather than selling them all on for a fee. The other 2 strategies that you can think about are the rent-to-rent strategies. One is rent to HMO and the other one is rent to service accommodation. And again, these are more about controlling properties as opposed to owning them, but you're controlling them to create an income. And essentially all you're doing is you're renting a property from the owner, from the landlord, or maybe through an agent, and then you're increasing the rent that you can get from that property so that you can pay the landlord and make a profit for yourself as well. And when it's rent to HMO, it's renting the rooms out individually, so you're increasing the income that way. Or if it's rent service accommodation, it might be that you're doing short stay, i.e. you're increasing a much higher income from that property because you're starting charging a nightly rate as opposed to a monthly or a 6-month type contract rate. So when you pay the landlord, you've got to get a margin between. So those are really your 3 ways to get started. I believe with this, when you've got such a small amount of money, and I would also, I'd suggest if you're going to start brand new, start with sourcing, get good at finding deals, because everything else can grow and stem from that. So that would be my suggestion. But those are the 3 routes I believe that will help you when you're getting started, or the ones you can follow. So thank you for that question. So our next question is from Martin Cash on YouTube. How do I deal with a LAO at the end of term in order to benefit from capital appreciation? Is it a case of taking out a new mortgage, or do I sell the property and benefit from the difference? So LAO, I'm assuming you're talking about lease option agreements, so I'll just assume that's what the question relates to, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe if you pop in the comment section, if it flashes up on screen quicker, I'll be able to see that. But I think you're referring to lease options. How do you benefit from at the end? So I'll also have another video on this in a couple of weeks' time about another property we've just sold, which we've had on a lease option. I'm trying to remember what the profit was on that, but it's probably 60 or 70,000 pounds we've made from that property by controlling it on a lease option. So there's a couple of different ways you can benefit from the increase in value, or what difference you've agreed to pay the seller of what the property is worth when you come to exit. Now that could be because you've improved it. It could be because you've just sat on it and the value's gone up over time. It could be because you agreed to buy below market value at a lower price. Martin's question, yes, it's a lease option. That's great, because that's the question I'm answering. So these are a few ways how you'd be able to lock in that equity into that lease option. But in terms of extracting it out, you have to remember that it's still owned by somebody else. With a lease option, you just control it. You have use of the property. You can make a monthly profit from it, i.e. the rental. But then the option will give you the ability to be able to purchase that property. But the purchase is exactly that. You have to purchase it from the current owner into either your name yourself, i.e. you're taking on that property. You become the owner, or you're selling it to somebody else. So I've done a mixture of the 2. So sometimes you'll sell the property to somebody else, and what that means, you make a profit, like the video I just mentioned now, that'll be out in a few weeks' time, where effectively by controlling and holding that property, when you come to sell it, you just control that transaction. Then the amount of money you agreed that would go to the seller, that still goes to the seller. So on Instagram, I think, seems to be playing up a little bit in terms of connection. You sell that property on, the cash comes in. Let's use some numbers here. Let's say you sell the property for £100,000. You agreed to pay the seller 70,000. Whenever you took that lease option out, that's what they're going to get. So the solicitor would receive 100,000. They send the 70,000 to the seller, and the 30,000 pounds come to you. That's essentially how you're making money from that particular transaction. Now, if on the other hand they had a mortgage on the property, then from that 70,000. What the solicitor would do is pay the mortgage off first, whatever that is. Let's say that was £60,000, and then there's £10,000 left for the seller. So that's essentially how you're exiting out of it. Now, if you're purchasing the property, this is where you can get a little bit unstuck, and this is a mistake that many people make. They just assume that they can remortgage a property or buy at its £100,000 value. Not so easy, because your option agreement is for £70,000. So when you exercise your option, the purchase price is going to be £70,000. So the lender is not going to give you a mortgage based on 100,000 valuation. They're going to give you a mortgage based on 70,000 valuation, which is probably not what you want to do, because then that means is you're losing access to that equity that you've built up. So the way to do that is you use a bridging loan to be able to purchase it. Effectively, you do a cash purchase of that property for the £70,000. So you give the seller the 70,000 you'd agreed with them, and then what you do is you remortgage the property a few months later. It's full value of £100,000, so maybe a £75,000 mortgage, which means that now you've extracted your money out, repay the bridging loan as well, and effectively end up with that property. So I hope that answers that question. These options can be a little bit technical in terms of how they're set up, and I think unfortunately too many people teach or have in the past taught lease option as just in a wishy-washy way and not really get into the details and the mechanics of how these deals work, and that's why they make a mess. I've seen a lot of people lose money from lease options as well, and also mess up the seller because they don't understand necessarily what they're doing. I've been over 30 lease options over the years, and really that's where this knowledge has come from experience of kind of figuring this out rather than just being learned. Even at the beginning when I was learning this stuff, going to courses, I learned the theory. Actually, the real knowledge came in the doing rather than just sitting and listening or reading your stuff. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you a few pointers in terms of how to get those deals done. So our next question is from Springer on YouTube. Can you get bridging finance with a criminal record? I'm not entirely sure about that. The way to think about bridging lenders are essentially private money. That's what it is. It's not like your regular bank that they're going to go in and you're going to do a full credit check. It's essentially private money. But what it also means is what they generally do is what they call asset-based lending. So I suspect even with a criminal record, even with lots of CCJs or defaults on your credit file, you could probably still get finance using bridging. I say probably because I'm not a lender, I don't know. If you speak to a good mortgage broker, I'm sure they'd be able to point you in the right direction. But I suspect you'd probably still be able to get finance because they're not going to assess lending the money to you necessarily. They're primarily interested in the asset they're lending money against. So let's say it's a £100,000 property that you're purchasing, and let's say they're going to lend you £70,000 or £60,000. If you think about it, the bridging lender that's lending that money, their money is very safe. It's unlikely they're going to lose their money, even if they have to repossess the property off you and dispose of it at auction. They're still going to get their money. They're not going to likely to lose out. So they'll be sitting in a very safe position. What you will find, though, is you'll probably end up paying quite a high rate. So you'll get penalized for the fact that, you might have a criminal record, or depending on what it relates to. There might be defaults on credit file, for example. So although you can still access the finance, you probably have to pay a high rate to do that. But as I said, speak to a good mortgage broker. I'm sure they can probably help you with that. But I don't think that would be an insurmountable challenge. The other thing you could do, if you're struggling to access finance, or being able to get finance at good rates, i.e. because of your circumstances, it means your rates that you're offered are horrendous, you could partner with somebody else to work with them and let them take the finance out effectively. And what that means is that the lending is based on them rather than you. You might have an arrangement with them how it's going to work. And also, if they're putting some money in, they're safe. If you're putting some money in, you need to structure it correctly so you're protected as well, that you don't lose out in that transaction. So I hope that gives you a few pointers there. Next question is from Gamble's Ruin on YouTube. YouTube's on fire today. I don't know what's happening on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. I don't seem to have many questions there, but let's crack on anyway. We've still got a few more minutes, so if you've got a question that you want to ask, make sure you pop it on the comment section. We'll try and get through that. So I'll just come to that question in just a moment. Just something else I wanted to share is on Friday the 1st, I'll be doing a special live. Just like this, I'm doing this live now. We'll be doing a live on Friday, the 1st of January, and you'll look out for the post on social media in terms of the time for that and also where to access it. It'll be on the platform pretty much as you're watching it now. And I'm going to do a session around how to make 2021 your best year yet. This is a planning tool and technique that I've been using for many, many years. And I'm going to share that with you on Friday. We'll run through it together. You'll just need a pen and paper, a bit of quiet time, and make sure you're tuned in. I'm going to run through that and try and put some plans together to help you make 2021 your best year yet. So make sure you look out for that. So let's get the question back on the screen. So the question is, what is your rubbish management like in your HMOs? So just to clarify that, I think you're talking about the rubbish that builds up in the properties rather than the service being rubbish. Does your cleaner come in weekly to take the rubbish out, or do they clean, or do your HMO tenants sort out themselves? Thank you. So first of all, it's a great question. HMOs, you certainly have a problem with refuge and in terms of recycling, getting the rubbish out. Problems, you also start finding problems with rodents and rats and issues as well, and pests, because it's not managed very well. So what we tend to do is look at each property in isolation and look at that. So sometimes you'll find that tenants are very good, they'll take care of this themselves, and that there's no issues with that. They sort it out. They have a rota between themselves, they get the rubbish put out on the days that it's going to be collected, and there's no issue there at all. On the other hand, in some places, you'll find that actually nobody picks up the rubbish or touches the rubbish, and it just builds up and becomes a bit of a mess. And in other cases, because these are people who are all unrelated living together in one shared house, let's say it's a 6-bedroom house and you've got 5 people that are really taking care of the place, and you get one who's let's face it, a dirty bugger. Now, what happens is that neglect by that individual can start putting the other people off. Because let's say the bathroom is being cleaned up after they're finished, and the one that's messy that comes in and they don't clean up after themselves, and the same thing in the kitchen and putting the rubbish out, what will happen after a while? All the good tenants will start thinking, well, why should we clean up after that individual all the time? And what happens is the quality of the property starts to deteriorate, and it doesn't really look so great. So what we tend to do is we ensure that the cleaners go around weekly, so we have weekly cleaning in all our properties. And what they'll do, they'll look at the rubbish. If the rubbish needs putting out, if it hasn't already been done, they'll do that, they'll put it out. In some of the properties, we've got the bigger trade bins as well, because smaller bins are not enough for the council. The ones that they provide us for the HMOs aren't enough. So what we do is we take some responsibility of making sure we get that rubbish out, because it's in our benefit to manage that well. If we just leave it to the tenants and just try and encourage them to do it, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So we'll look at each property individually, and also then keep a close eye on that. If we need to get more involved in getting it resolved, we do, because sometimes recycling can be really bad. For example, people will put rubbish in the recycling bin, then the bin isn't collected, and that becomes an issue. But then what happens, because it's been left behind that week and the hasn't been collected and taken away, the following week now there's more rubbish, and the rubbish from the last week hasn't been taken away. So if we don't take responsibility for that and deal with it, even though it's not our problem, we haven't created, the tenants haven't been responsible, what will happen is it'll just build up and become a bigger problem. So we'll get involved and resolve that, and then work with the tenants the best we can to try and encourage them to take some responsibility for it. So let's get our next question on the screen. Is from YouTube, also for Han78. Hi Saj, would you recommend BRRR as first-time investors with 30-40k investment, or is it better to buy to flip? So your BRRR, I'm assuming you mean buy, refurbish and refinance, and with a flip you renovate and sell. Well, look, really this depends on what it is you're ultimately trying to achieve, and it also depends on the property as well. So if it's a property that needs a huge amount of work, you've got to think about what experience you have of being able to manage that. If you're just starting out, you don't want to get into something that's way too deep for you in terms of your lack of experience, that you'll get your fingers burnt. So you've got to be very careful. Although property, generally speaking, is fairly safe, but a lack of knowledge can also mean that it's very easy to make huge mistakes as well, and those mistakes can be very, very expensive. So that's one thing to first of all think about. Now, if you want to keep it nice and simple, if you already own your home, for instance, it might be that you purchase your first buy-to-let property. So you're putting some money down as a deposit. You've got to have some money to be able to refurbish that property as well, and then you're going to refinance it. Now, don't assume on the refinance you're going to be able to get all your money out. It doesn't always happen. As I mentioned earlier on, I'll have a video on this next week on the channel. Make sure you look out for that. Now, if you don't already own any property, then sometimes buying, refurbishing to sell might be an easier strategy to do. One, it builds up your experience, and two, you're not limited by being able to try and refinance at the other end, which you might struggle with. If you don't already own a home, you're going to be facing some other challenges that more experienced investors wouldn't when it comes to refinancing. So these are things that you need to think about. So it's not just simple as just do this or this. There's a lot of other questions that need to be asked. So for example, when I'm working with people, I'm mentoring people, one of the first things we do is spend half a day together on a strategy session just to get really, really clear. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is the objective? Where is it we're trying to get to? And often people start with a strategy. I want to do this strategy, that strategy. I think it's important to work out why is it you want to get into property, what is it you're trying to achieve. If this is the goal that you're trying to achieve, and this is where we are right now, then we've got to look at, the bigger picture in terms of where you are in the country, how much money you have, what experience you have, what availability to finance you have, how mortgageable you might be, what are the skills that you have that are transferable, that can be used in what you're going to do. Take those things into consideration, then work out the right strategy that's going to work for you based on what you're trying to achieve. And then really over the 12 months, my objective is to support you in helping to get your outcome that you're looking for. That's really how the mentoring works. So the reason I share that is because, you can do this for yourself. You need to first think about why you want to do this. What is it you're trying to achieve? Think about it's a little bit like a SWOT analysis. Yeah, if you're familiar with this in business, strengths, weakness, opportunity, threats, you do a SWOT analysis on yourself and your business model, what you're trying to do. And then you work out which is going to be the best strategy for you. Is it going to be flipping? Is it going to be BRRR? Is it going to be lease options? Is it going to be auction purchase? Is it going to be developments? Is it going to be HMOs? Is it going to be rent to rent? Is it going to be service accommodation? There's so many different things you can do, but you can't do all of them. and finding the right one and sticking to it. And if there's one piece of advice that I would give to somebody starting out in property, and that is you've got to be absolutely focused and stick to the strategy that you're doing. Now, many people will just dabble and then they find they're not getting the success and the results that they want and they give up too quickly. And that's probably the most common reason people will fall out of property and stop doing property or not really make much progress, because they give up too quickly. But if you've got complete focus, or maybe you've got the support around you as well, then you can keep going and getting better and better at what you do. And that's what will help you move towards your goals. So I hope that helps. So have we got another question coming up on screen? Okay. So our next question is from Ahmed on LinkedIn. Hi Saj, if you are investing into buy-to-let, is interest only better than the other one? The other one being repayment. So when you're purchasing a property which is going to be tenanted, your options in terms of mortgages are one that's an interest only or one that's a repayment. With an interest only mortgage, what you're doing is just paying the interest each month. And then at the end of the term, let's say it's a 20-year loan, you borrowed 100 grand from the bank, you still owe them 100 grand at the end of that term. If it's a repayment mortgage, what that means is you're paying the interest each month with a little bit towards reducing the debt. Now, the way these the way the mortgages work, for the majority of the beginning part of that loan and the mid part of that loan, you're paying mostly interest with a smaller amount of capital. And then as it gets towards the end, it flips over where you start paying your payment each month, more of it moves towards the capital reducing and less of it towards the interest. So my personal preference is the interest-only mortgage. And so really you need to think about what's going to be right for you. And this way you need to sit down with a mortgage broker and get some guidance from them. And the vast majority of buy-to-let investors tend to go interest-only. And the reason for that is because you're trying to build up cash flow. Let's say your rent is, say, £500, keep the number simple, you've got £300 mortgage, you've got £200 left over each month. So that's your cash flow, about 2.5 grand a year. Not a huge amount, you could have some repairs, maintenance, voids and things to think about as well. But you've got a little bit of profit. With intention, long-term, that value will increase over time. And let's say it's worth significantly more. Let's say it could be double what it's worth right now in 10, 15, 20 years' time. So even if you left it on the same interest-only mortgage, at the end of the mortgage term, the property is going to be worth significantly more, most probably, and that's why most people invest in buy-to-let. So at that point, you can either refinance the property, get onto a new mortgage to clear the previous one off and go for another term, or alternatively, what you might do is just sell the property and exit at that point, pay whatever taxes are due, and pay off the mortgage that's already on the property, and you're left with a profit. And there's many different strategies. Also, you've got to look at tax efficient routes in terms of how you set this up, because this is really, really critical right now, because the government is changing the rules in terms of how things work when it comes to tax on buy-to-let investment. So setting it up now, right from the offset, is absolutely critical in getting this right. Now, if you do a repayment mortgage, what will happen is that £200 profit we're talking about each month, that will shrink. That might be £100 because there needs to be an additional contribution toward paying down that debt over the term of the mortgage. And what that will mean is that your cash flow becomes tiny. And also what you're doing is you're only able to offset the interest part against your against your tax. And so you're being hit twice, in the sense that you've entered with very little cash and you can't offset all the money against your tax as well there. But what it does mean is you're paying the debt down over time. So as I said, it becomes a personal preference. Mine is to go interest only, because I think that's the best way to leverage property. And also over time, if values are increasing, which is why we get involved in property, we think over time values will be significantly more. So you're making the best use of the tools available for you to be able to benefit from property. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. That just leaves me to say thank you so much for watching. Oh, we've got one final question on the screen from Nora on YouTube. Saj, do you mentor people? I do. I do a mentoring program, which is a 12-month program. It's a small program, but I run small in the sense it's a small number of people I work with at any one time. I certainly don't run these big programs with 50, 100, 150 people in there in the group or in the environment. For me, it's really important that I understand the individuals that's looking for the support. Firstly, I can help them achieve what they're trying to do, that I've got the experience, I can tap into and support them based on the strategy they're trying to do, because I've done lots of different types. And if it's something I can't help with, I'll say, look, this is not something I've got experience in, I can't necessarily help you with that. But if it is, then that's the first thing. I want to make sure that I've got the skill set to support them to be able to get the results that they're looking for. Secondly, it's somebody that's driven and focused and is actually going to listen to and take the guidance I'm going to give them to actually get out and do what they need to do. Because sometimes people want help and support, but actually don't then listen to it and don't take the guidance, and you think, what's the point? I'm wasting my time, they're wasting their time and money as well. So really, it's a case of finding a right fit. So yes, I do some mentoring. It's application based on. If that's something you're interested in, ping me a message. The investment varies from about £6,000 up to £20,000 a year, depending on what level of experience you have. So you are making a sizable investment. But my objective is to help you achieve huge results during those 12 months. So you're certainly earning back way more than you're investing in the mentoring. So thanks for that question. All you need to do is ping me a message on whatever platform you're watching on if you want some help, and then we'll look to see if I'm a good fit and I can help you with your particular goals. So I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Make sure you look out for Friday, the 1st of January, where we're doing a planning session in the afternoon. We'll put some posts up on social media in terms of when that'll be. It'll be on the platforms like this, just as you're watching now. I want to really help you make 2021 your best year yet. And then we'll be back here next Monday for our regular 8:30 session, where I'm helping you get further faster in your property investing journey. Thank you so much.